and welcome to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. Today we're discussing top scorers in Spain. Messi has broken the record, or has he? And Falcao managed 5 in one game. Last time that happened was in 2002 with Fernando Morientes. Anyway, other than that, we're talking about Juventus, we're talking about transfer rumours, we're talking about France and so much more. But please let me present to you my co-pilot for today, which is none other than Paul Watson. Now, am I to understand that you love Italian football?
I do, yes. I'd say I love Italian football more than any other football in the world.
That's exactly why you're here today.
Exactly.
not that I, favour people or anything like that whatsoever. But, we'll leave that aside for a second because we need to start with Spain. Because, of course, is there anything to talk about other than Lionel Messi and the fact that he broke the record? He now managed 88. But did he break the record?
Well, I don't know that he did. I feel quite sorry for the poor guy that he breaks what he thinks is the record. And then the next week is basically people saying that it's not the record. People coming out of the woodwork saying, actually, it might not be. Was it Zico?
With 89 goals?
Or Godfrey Chitalu of Zambia.
Zambia. What was it, 107 goals?
Yeah, something unrealistic sounding like that. But, I mean, you can't help but say Messi's fairly good.
OK, but let me ask you this question now. Gerd Mullers, when he won his record, he did so having won the European Cup and pretty much every trophy that was on offer in that year. Now, what Messi's walked away with essentially is a Copa del Rey.
Yes, which is a trophy.
Does that make him less of a great scorer than Gerd Mullers?
No, I don't think it does. And I think in a way it makes him a better player because I think he's probably had to do a lot of legwork for this team. I think at times Barcelona have been held together by Messi in a way that Muller wouldn't have had to hold together his side.
Because he's just a guy who sat around the 6-yard box, huh?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I think what Messi's contribution in general is what makes it so astonishing. He's not a striker, he's not a poacher in that conventional sense. So for him to have got to this total of goals, it's still the tip of the iceberg of his actual contribution.
So who's better, him or Ronaldo?
It's very hard to answer that question without kind of saying who you like more. I think that's when I generally...
Who do you like more?
Everyone likes Messi more, don't they?
I'm not going to have a comment about it. I think people already know how I feel on it.
Fair enough.
I guess with Messi, what makes him so special is his ability to provide so much more than just simple goals. I mean, he provides an astonishing amount. Obviously, he's breaking records. But at the same time, he delivers the assist. He makes his forward line work better than it would without him. Whereas I guess Ronaldo, and especially how he seems to be feeling this season, perhaps is a player that's a tad more selfish. But what about Falcao? Could he ever hope to one day reach the levels that any of these guys have managed so far?
Well, he's not, in terms of Falcao and Messi, Falcao is not really comparable to Messi. Falcao is very much in the more traditional mould. He's a goal-getter. He's a fantastic goal-getter. And in fact, he, again, kind of overshadowed Messi, which was quite funny.
You think so?
Well, just in terms of you have a weekend's action and you kind of say, OK...
Messi's broken a record.
Messi's broken a record. Falcao scored 5 goals. He's broken his own record. He's broken the Madrid record for goals in a game. He scored 5 goals in a game against La Coruña, admittedly. But this is a fantastic achievement. And it's an achievement that kind of says, this is a player that can take a team on. He could possibly take this team into a title challenge, admittedly not successfully, but he is what's made Atletico title challengers rather than 3rd or 4th, I think. OK,
last year when they were playing, they had Diego, obviously, Arda Turan. And this season, perhaps, it's just really... Because Diego's not there, he's had to take more... he's had to do more for the team to basically lead it, guide it, and score more goals. Do you think that's actually worked to his benefit? Because he's performing a lot better. It's
possibly, yeah. I mean, it's worked to his benefit as an individual, but I think the strain on him may start to show later on. Diego is a massive loss. Diego's a fantastic footballer. You only have to look and see how well he's doing at the moment in Germany, and you think, that's a great player.
If he's so great, then why is he back in playing for results?
It may be because of the moustache that he's grown. Have you seen the moustache?
No, I haven't seen
it doesn't belong on a football pitch. It doesn't really belong anywhere.
But it just seems wherever he goes, he does a good job, and then somehow he doesn't end up there.
I think possibly it might be the culture. I think Diego really enjoys the German football culture. I think it's slightly more relaxed.
Do you really think so? Or I think he desperately wanted to stay at Atletico Madrid, but when it came to finances, they had to let one of their top stars go.
Yeah, oh no, I don't think he wanted to leave Atletico. No, that's not the reason why he left. But I think he is possibly thriving in a slightly less high-pressure environment where the level is generally lower, I think. I think he would have happily stayed, but that's the lot of Atletico, is to shed players.
Yeah, unfortunately.
You shed your skin, you grow a new one. That's the way it is for them.
It was actually a really funny story because Florentino Perez made a joke about how he would pass the serviette to Falcao, which is, of course, how he managed to sign Zinedine Zidane in Monaco in about 2000, I think, when he passed him a napkin saying, "I want to play for Real Madrid," at the time when he was with Juventus, and that's when he responded saying, "Yeah, sure, let's play for Real Madrid." Of course, Falcao didn't get it, maybe because he's very young and he doesn't remember the year 2000, or maybe he just never heard of that whole joke at the time. But they are facing each other. Next match is between Barcelona and Atletico Madrid, so it will be rather Falcao versus Messi.
It will hopefully. Well, Falcao's got a bit of an injury. He didn't train today, and he didn't play in the Copa del Rey, but that's who does.
Yeah, exactly.
But he may. I don't think he'll miss it. I think they're being very careful with it. But it would be a real shame if he were kind of half fit, because it would be a bit like kind of David Hay losing that fight and saying he had a broken toe. You want to see the two best strikers, best goal scorers up against each other. To call it a title decider, as people are, is misleading.
They are number one and number two.
It's misleading, though, I think, because what we're effectively saying is, will there be a title race at all? If Atletico can win this, which I don't think they can, we may have a title race.
We're very down on them.
I'm not very down on them particularly. I really honestly
can't see it happening.
I can't see it happening. I would actually like it to happen. I think fans of football would like it to happen, just for there to be a race. But I think the tragedy is that Real started so poorly and have been so shaky that there's no race to be had. Because I think while they've got the strength and depth in that squad to challenge, I just don't think Atletico do.
Right, and that's another thing about Real Madrid. They lost their Copa del Rey fixture yesterday against Celta Vigo, and of course Mourinho came out and said, well, certain players didn't really put their heart into it, and it's all of that usual. But really, should they be losing such matches, even if it is just a Copa del Rey fixture?
They shouldn't. I can understand the lack of motivation. It's the Carling Cup of Spain. It's a competition that people don't particularly want to be in. I don't think there's really any excuse to be losing those kind of games. And I think the biggest concern for Real is that they need to be looking at the fact they're conceding quite sloppy goals, and this is going into their league form too. Set pieces. I think they've conceded half their goals pretty much have been set pieces. They've conceded 11, I think, set pieces. And
Sergio Ramos is not doing very well when it comes to those either.
No, Sergio Ramos seems to have kind of forgotten his defensive responsibilities, as is his wont. You know, he will do that from time to time. But from set pieces, you just shouldn't be conceding at that level, at the rate they're conceding. And I think if they don't sort that out, I think that is the kind of thing that will cost them in the Champions League for sure, which is realistically their only big priority.
So that's it, you're saying La Liga's over?
I'm not saying it's over. I'm certainly not saying it's over. It would be a massive turnaround from here. I think you'd have to agree. It would be a massive turnaround.
It would be a massive turnaround from here. But, you know, funnily enough, I just don't even think this is the strongest Barcelona that we have seen in recent years. I think that Villanova has managed to construct a side that's, you know, perhaps is breaking records by all means with how many points they have accumulated. But at the same time, there's a certain fragility about Barcelona that I have not seen before. Whether it be at the back, obviously they've been missing Carlos Puyol and Gerard Piqué for the majority of the season. But there's something about them that just doesn't make them as strong as usual. And they really suffered against Real Betis. Now, I'm kind of I'm a huge Pepe Mel fan. He's got some ideas that I don't like. The fact that he refuses to train without the ball. I think it's important to train without the ball. But anyway, that's not for me to say. And he's a little bit old school. And he's someone who answers all the questions that are a little bit, you know, tricky by throwing in a joke when he doesn't want to say something like, oh, we haven't spoken about Mourinho. It's been 20 minutes, you know, like, let's divert attention away. He writes mystery novels in his spare time. But are Betis possibly able to get into Champions League, please?
Yeah, I think they are.
You really think so?
I think possibly you set me up to say yes there. But I think there is, well, for one thing, there's a real dearth of strong, solid, consistent contenders below the top three. And even, you know, you look at Real, and Real look kind of suspect on their days off, which they have quite regularly now. Betis, and especially Pepe Mel, they have a solidity about them. They're a very strong team unit. They're not entirely dependent on one star. People look at Beñat and they're saying, you know, if they lose him, what will happen? Well, they surely won't lose him in January. So I think they've got a run this year to try and effectively earn a finish that allows him to stay at the club and to build. But I think one of the main things that really strikes me at Betis is that they stuck by their man in Pepe Mel, possibly because he's such a hugely popular character with the fans. You know, he's a legend at the club. But they stuck with him during a really tough spell. And he's had time and he's had continuity.
When they were like losing sort of 9 matches.
Yeah, exactly. Which 9 matches in...
And then 1 draw, 10 without a win.
Yeah, and I think that was a local derby draw or something.
Sevilla.
I mean, it's 9. You lose 9 matches in Spain, you expect to be gone. You lose 9 matches in most top leagues, you expect to be gone.
Oh, in Italy, you'd be gone a long time ago.
In Italy, you'd be gone 3 times over. They'd sack you for your next few jobs as well.
Yeah.
But I think the fact they stuck with him, he's built something that is cohesive. He has a mentality that the players accept and can understand. I think that's invaluable. And while the teams around them are kind of floundering and coming up with new ideas and throwing all sorts of kind of new managers in, and they're just staying solid. And I think that, at the end of the day, could pay off.
Well, there's a few, like you said, the chasing pack is rather strong about who can follow the, well, I guess it's duopoly this season between Atletico Madrid and Barcelona. But unfortunately, one of them is not going to be Bilbao with what's going on there. Now, Fernando Llorente has come out and said, unfortunately for a Juventus fan like me, that he wouldn't mind moving to the English Premier League. I mean, of course, who is going to mind moving there? But do you think that he would fit in, and do you think that it's likely that he would choose that, considering how much he's been associated to Serie A?
I actually think it's a great thing for him if he moves to England, and I think it's a let-off both for him and for Juventus that he doesn't go there. Because I think he's a fantastic striker. But I really think the way that Juventus play, it rejects the big man, and I think they've done well. You know, Alessandro Matri, he's effectively disappeared. He's invisible at Juventus. Juventus are playing the ball in a way that they don't need a big, powerful kind of Llorente figure.
So what do they need, a Suarez?
Yeah, ideally. If
really?
Juventus could
Because
sign
I actually
Suarez,
think they do need it. I think they need an Higuain, essentially, a scrappy player.
Maybe an Higuain might work, but I think
Llorente is
a bad fit. Whereas in the Premier League, I think he would fit in fantastically with some time. And I think that's the crucial caveat here, is that in England, Spanish players especially, when they come to the Premier League, they get judged so very quickly. And it can often be a bit of a culture shock, to say the least. But I think stylistically, he's an English-style player.
Yeah,
he just does it better than most English players could.
But who would go for him?
Well, that's the problem, I think. And this is often the problem when you have a striker like that who's clearly better than the club he's at. That isn't up for debate. He will not continue to play for Bilbao, not least because of all the kind of disputes that took place. But that doesn't necessarily mean there's a club that is a perfect fit for him elsewhere. He may well end up being kind of shoehorned into a club where he just doesn't quite fit in, and that's your fear.
Stoke?
Yeah, probably Stoke.
Well, that's it for Spain, but do join us after the break when we will be talking to Tancredi and Italian football and so much more. See you then. Hello and welcome back to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. Well, it was an interesting week, kind of, for Italian football. I think the most interesting thing, or at least the most interesting game, we're not going to talk about Coppa Italia, well, we will do a little bit later on because, you know, it's the usual stuff. Juventus won, blah, blah. But actually, Milan played today, Regina. But what I want to talk about is Napoli, Inter versus Napoli over the weekend, because I thought that was such an interesting match, because I think this is kind of determining who will really challenge Juventus for the title. I have a problem with Napoli in the sense that I can never see them as being serious challengers, despite how beautiful that their football can be at times, despite how ambitious Walter Mazzarri is, and how good the quality of especially their attack. But as long as they continue conceding the kind of goals that they concede, they seem to sort of lose faith. They get a little bit tired at times. They lack concentration. Do they really? And Mazzarri gets a little bit too emotional that perhaps he doesn't really know. I still blame him for the goal for their loss to Juventus. It was entirely him at the time when Castello scored. He didn't know how to arrange his defence. Do you think they really are title contenders?
I actually agree with you. I don't think they are. And for several reasons. I mean, you're saying their defence, and I certainly agree, the goals they concede to Inter, certainly the way they played defensively against Inter invited trouble. But actually, their strikers were profligate. There were chances being missed all over the place.
Yeah.
Napoli had, like, the lion's share of the possession, and they were unable to do anything with it. And I think partly that's because they're used to playing on the break and they're used to driving forwards. They've got players that are drivers. They haven't got players that will set up and create.
They like to be attacked and then they go forward.
They like to counter-attack. So you've got two teams playing counter-attacking styles, and obviously that's going to lead to the kind of slight unease on both sides. But I would say with Napoli, I agree. I think Mazzari's built a style that's beautiful to watch, but extremely labour-intensive.
Yeah, and perhaps not one that can survive all these things. But do you think that it would, the fact that Inter did, score quite early on, that it allowed them to play the kind of game they wanted to play, where they could sit back and just watch Napoli trying to do something, played into their hands a little bit?
Yeah, well, it certainly did. I mean, obviously you never want to concede an early goal, but in a game like that, you could see that it really changed the entire foundation of Mazzari's plans.
What about Strama?
What, in terms of Strama, that must have been playing exactly into his hands. I mean, I think that game could have played out in 5 or 6 different ways if different events had happened in the early stages of the game. But I fully expected Inter to struggle in that game. I didn't think, the one thing I thought they wouldn't do was win that game, because they've really not impressed recently.
You really don't think so?
I don't think so. They're getting results.
Juventus.
Well, yeah. I mean, they beat Juventus and they played the game of their lives, and then after that, for however many weeks, they look slow and sluggish. They lack Wesley Sneijder, obviously, but Guarin can step in and do the job. But ultimately, where's the magic in this Inter side? It's not there. This is an Inter side that is fully functional, but it lacks that spark, and they're relying on Cassano for that, and you can't.
Well, maybe if they sort out their problems with Wesley Sneijder, and I think Guarin can sometimes be deployed in quite a clever way, in which I thought he was against Napoli, then they have a hope. But I'm a huge fan of Stramaccioni, and we've got Tancredi Palmieri with us now, live from Italy. Hello, Tank. How are you?
Buongiorno. Sun is shining on my face. No, it's joking. It's snowing outside.
I was pretty sure it was right. I wanted to talk to you because obviously you know that I'm a huge fan of Stramaccioni. Perhaps there is a problem in the sense that Inter tend to perform better in the big games, and then they struggle when it's teams like Siena or the smaller squads, even like Palermo. So do you think that basically they have this mentality where they can win against the big and then maybe lose against the small?
Let's see, partially. I mean, we will have very soon a proof of that, because on Saturday Inter is playing Lazio, so it's the final proof about that. Must say that would be unfair also towards Stramaccioni to say that is untrue, because they've beaten Juventus, Fiorentina, Napoli, Milan. Okay, that Milan. But you were talking about the game, but actually Inter struggled indeed against Napoli. They were, I don't want to say lucky, but they were clever enough to find the goal after 8 minutes, and that put them, of course, in a favorable situation. But honestly, nobody would have shouted against the bad luck if Napoli would at least draw the game.
But I think that tells you a lot, Tancredi, because what you're saying, I agree with 100%. I think Napoli were the better side, essentially, when you're watching the match. But when you looked at the corner kick in which they conceded, you could see that Stramaccioni was very intelligent with how he said it, how he's trained them beforehand, how to attack the weaknesses of Napoli. He knows that that's where their weaknesses are. But I think that's what makes Inter so good, is that they're not actually such a great squad. Paul was telling us that as well, but it's the fact they know how to make the most of what they have.
Yeah, but it's like it's a bit challenging your luck, because if you rely just on the magnificent creativity of Cassano, or one scheme on a free kick, or on a set piece that is nice, but sooner or later people will find your trick, or Milito. I mean, you need to be more continuous. If we compare this game to the one that Inter won against Juventus, there is, in spite of saying, oh yeah, they always win against the big clubs, well, there is such a huge difference between the two games. That time, Inter crashed Juventus, and even if they weren't awarded, or even if Juventus didn't get the red card that they had a illegal goal that was awarded by the penalty. But Inter was so much better. This time, honestly, that you could still spot all the mistakes that you've seen in the previous games after the minor teams like Siena, against Atalanta, Cagliari and Palermo, with one difference, that this time Cassano was back, and how much is different this team when Cassano is on and when he's not there. So while you make points, still need to upgrade a bit the build-up of Stramaccioni.
Tancredi, is there a solution in January? Is there a signing that Inter can make to kind of make up for Schneider probably leaving, or do you think he might stay?
Well, the thing is that the 6 million wages of Schneider, it's pretty an obstacle for almost everybody that want to approach him, because it's even quite some wages in England where they don't have problems with I would say, with paying the clause, with paying the price of Snyder, but they would have having a problem in paying his wages. The way they dealt, we spoke already about that, the way they dealt with that, it's terrible, it's a disaster. If you are Inter, and if you have a player like Snyder, you just don't do it that way. It's like, it's really like no respect for your history, no respect for the player, no respect for your season, because Inter needed so much Schneider when they dropped points against Cagliari, Atalanta, etc. I think, in my opinion, if this triangle between PSG and Milan in some way that would work, I mean, like saying Schneider,
Pastore.
Yeah, Schneider to PSG, Pastore on loan to Milan, and maybe Inter getting the right money to then sign Paulinho from Corinthians. Maybe in that way it could work. The last rumor, the very last rumor of yesterday was that PSG, I'm not sure if to believe to that, but that PSG would even agree to a swap between Schneider and Verratti. I don't know much is true that, but a couple of sources talking about that.
No, I did hear. I don't think that would ever. Why would anyone let go of Verratti, especially
it would
how
be
he's
madness to do that. I don't understand.
But I can understand perhaps a potential swap between Schneider and Pastore, just because Pastore has been a little bit woeful.
Well, Pastore's struggling possibly for personal reasons. I mean, he's come a bit better in the last 2 weeks. And Schneider, there is no going back. And I think the one thing I do disagree with from Tancredi, respectfully so, is I don't think you can say to Stramaccioni, you must play Schneider. I think a manager cannot pick a player who he knows is going to leave, who wants to leave. I just think you can't do that. You have to build. You
know what? The thing is that the club shouldn't have put the manager in this situation.
I agree.
They should have dealt much better. Like, while we understand if he's gonna come to our position or we are going closer to his position. Anyway, there is a season that is going on. Now that the situation is so rotten, I would say, of course, Stramaccioni is in trouble to playing him. But the club shouldn't have get until the position that everybody knows, everybody's aware of that. There is something like, or you accept our contract, our conditions, or you don't play anymore. That's mad. That's absolutely mad.
No, I agree with that. I do feel like it's a little bit like bullying, you know, and it's what we've seen in the past from Italian clubs, and it's also what we're seeing with Bilbao and perhaps Llorente as well. I don't think so, but I do think that, I know that perhaps he might be leaving, but I do. Why would you not play him and get the best out of him when he is kind of your creative solution?
I know what you're saying, but I think the problem is that a team is a system, and you have to build a system around the people who are in that team. So if you build an Inter that is dependent on Schneider in any way, and then he disappears, and it's not even as clear-cut as that. You're building an Inter around Schneider who may leave. So you're building a team that could suddenly have its centre point pulled out and like a kind of Jenga tower just collapse. Whereas instead, if you accept that he's probably gone,
right,
and
okay,
you build
then you just kind of, yeah,
then at least his departure suddenly just frees up the potential for an exciting new player. It doesn't seem like you've just lost a massive playmaker and someone who you depend on. I admit it seems slightly kind of counterproductive when you see Inter really struggling, especially with the smaller teams where they've got to dictate pace and they're struggling to have that kind of flash of brilliance. But I really do think as a coach you're compromised if you have to work with someone who is probably leaving, in fact almost definitely leaving, or going to be a rebel of some kind in your squad.
Sure. I mean, I know that his wife really wants to stay in Milan, and I kind of don't blame her when looking at all the offers that perhaps might come in. But what about, you know, Tancredi, what about Juventus, Napoli, Roma? Who do you really think is possibly going to mount the serious challenge for a title, or is it really just all Juve's?
Well, the thing that we all think is that Juve, in some way, Juve just can lose this championship in a way. There is one thing to think about. Now Conte is back, and until the Champions League will kick off again, Juventus got ahead one couple of months of fixtures. That means playing seven Serie A games against none of the direct rivals for the title. Not even Milan, that in this moment is the seventh in the table, if I'm not mistaken. This means that from now until the point when we'll restart the Champions League, Juventus can make a gap, now is plus 4 points, of at least plus 8, plus 10 maybe. It's all in this couple of months. Inter is now second, is 1 point up on Napoli, but still they have these maturity problems, I would say. In my opinion, for what we have seen, for the kind of game, for the personality, in my opinion, the real anti-Juve is still one is there behind. If only Berbatov would have agreed to go with them, and I'm talking about Fiorentina, because Fiorentina, in my opinion, is the only one that have looked in the eyes every team that I've played with, that never lost concentration, but the squad is that, and when Jovetic and also Toni is out for injuries, for them it's very hard to convert all the game that they have. So for me, Fiorentina, but it's difficult without Jovetic.
All about Jovetic. Tancredi, that's all we have time for with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Perhaps join us next week as well to fill us in. But just to finish off, you seem to really disagree about this whole Fiorentina thing.
I do. I like Fiorentina. I feel a lot of warmth towards Montella. I love how they play the game. But I really do think there's so much, well, there's a lack of strength in depth there. Against Roma, without Pizarro, they looked completely exposed. It
is kind of that midfield that seems to be dependent on one another, and if one of them sort of comes out, then it looks like the whole thing falls apart.
Nothing there. It's a house of cards in that element, and without Jovetic, okay, that's a big loss, but they have to address that loss. You know, your title race doesn't kind of stop because you lose a major player. They haven't had him for ages, and they haven't managed to build anything around him. I really like Fiorentina. This isn't a title-winning side. It's not a title-chasing side.
What about Roma?
Roma, well, considering...
They're doing so well at the moment.
I like Roma, and I love the fact that Zemun has been under pressure. Zemun's been, people have been talking about him losing his job in the last few weeks. And then, you know, they go out and they squash Fiorentina, and suddenly he's the best possible manager, and him and Totti are kind of cuddling each other, and it's all lovely. But it's...
Poor Daniele De Rossi.
Yeah, poor De Rossi. And again, Roma, this is, again, not a Scudetto-winning side. I mean, how could it be?
But doesn't it look like whenever you have a bad defence, you're just not a Scudetto-winning side?
Well, exactly. No one can win a Scudetto with a defence like Fiorentina's or like Roma's. Fiorentina's has had its moments, but at the end of the day, you're kind of relying on people to do two jobs so often in order to allow people to be released down the wings, and you really need top quality players to do that. And okay, Roncaglia maybe is at Fiorentina, but I don't rate the rest of the back line.
Quick one, do you think they'll make Champions League places?
Fiorentina?
No, Roma.
I think Roma will. I think they'll squeeze
Top three?
it. I think they'll possibly squeeze in, yeah. I mean, in honesty, this should all be moot, because if things had gone differently for Milan, I swear that it could have been a very different season. I really feel for Allegri. I think he's had impossible situation to work with a lot of the time. He's basically been told, you're an interim manager to manage our temporary decline before we get someone we actually want in this job.
Yeah, but I know that you're a huge fan of Allegri, and you know I'm not. But
I'm not a huge fan. I just really feel for him, and I feel like that Milan team actually has some really good elements in it. And if Prince Boateng can kind of grow up a little bit, and if Robinho can disappear, then perhaps you've got a side there.
Perhaps, maybe not. And then now they've lost De Jong. Do Milan even have a chance? But do join us off the break, and we'll talk some more about European football. See you then. Welcome back to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. Now we move on to France. It's been a while since we've chatted about this, but we simply have to, because there is an important match on Sunday between PSG and Lyon. And I think it's quite interesting that both of them struggled against Nancy, but we're not, Nancy, rather, let's say it the way that it's properly meant to be said. But I want to talk about, firstly, the fact that you think PSG still have a chance at winning the title.
A chance.
A chance. A very good chance.
I know. It's
you're almost convinced that they're winning.
Must be 100 to 1 shot. But no, I really think they've wobbled, they've ridden the storm, and they're coming back with a couple of 4-0 wins. I mean, essentially, you can't throw that much money at a team.
Okay, hold on. Their players have come out and said, no, we really, really care about the Champions League games because it's the big games and we're geared up for them.
Sure.
It's the little games we're not that interested in, so we don't mind losing to the likes of Nancy.
Yeah, I mean, they possibly are more motivated by the Champions League, but there's not a team in the world that wouldn't want to win a title.
But to announce it in public?
Yeah, that's probably not great PR. But I don't think that, the fact they can do this and they can behave in what could best describe as a moronic fashion on and off the field for about 3 weeks, and yet they're still right there at the top of the table. They're not far behind. They can catch up to Lyon, and there's just so much ability in this team. It's a team that's been cobbled together like a fantasy football team, and it stands out head and shoulders above other French sides in terms of talent.
Okay, so basically you're saying because they have so much money and they've built so much talent that they have to win it. But do they really have that team ethic? Because as far as I'm concerned, it's, Silva defends, Verratti passes the ball and Zlatan scores. Or if it is a Champions League game, then he'll, come back a little bit and then spray the ball around and he'll hit Lavezzi, he'll score. So can we really say that? When you look at Lyon and when you look at Marseille, there's a real team ethic about them. And also, I guess, with Lyon, what's so brilliant about them is Gomis, who's been scoring for them ridiculously. That's, 9 in 14? Is he just as good as Zlatan when it comes to, or his importance? Is he just as important to his team as Zlatan is to PSG?
I would say he probably is. I mean, Zlatan has carried PSG on numerous occasions this season, and Gomis also has had to kind of step in and be the saviour. For Lyon, I think the big difference for me is at the moment we're seeing a complete injury crisis for Remy Gard. He's got enormous selection problems ahead of this crunch clash, and it really brings home how flimsy that squad is in comparison to PSG, where you just have a lot of players waiting around who could do a great job for them. Lyon don't have that, and
you think that was what will perhaps see them lose?
Ultimately, it will, and I think. I would love to see them mount a successful title challenge, because I think it would be almost a fairy tale story in that, you have the team with all the resources who basically expect to win the title so much, like you say, that their players are effectively saying, oh, well, we can win the title, but we want to win the Champions League, which they won't. And then you've got Lyon, who are just gutsy every week and are fighting for their lives. And that's why when they basically almost lost to Nancy, who are so bad. I think they were doing the worst that a team had ever done in Ligue 1, Ligue 1. I think that they hadn't won since the opening day, as I remember it. And when they drop, they were lucky to get a draw out of that game.
With
and
Bastos.
I think that's Bastos coming to save the day. But I think that's fatigue, and it's perhaps a lack of options. And whereas PSG are going to buy in January and possibly buy big. Could be Schneider.
Well, they'll get Lucas Moura.
They'll get Lucas Moura, the much vaunted Lucas Moura. They just seem to have limitless resources, and I think eventually that tells.
Well, you see, my problem with them is also I think they've got quite a narrow midfield and it allows sides to find a way to get through them and to kind of overwhelm them. But what I'm interested about is also the whole story with Ancelotti, because sort of before his arrival as PSG, he was always that big coach, he always knew how to make a team win. And then, of course, they were doing so well last season. Then they sacked their coach, they brought on Ancelotti, and he didn't even win the title. And he came with much fanfare and everything around him. Leonardo was convinced he was the man. Again, we've talked about this time, they've even managed to reach 4th place. Yes, they're in 2nd. They're only 3 points behind Lyon, which could stretch to 6 should Lyon grab an away win on the weekend. But does this man, who has everything at his disposal, every single talented player, or at least talented midfielder, if he doesn't win it, should he really, the title, should he really not be on his way out?
I think he should, and I think he may well be on the way out anyway. There are talks, I don't know how substantiated, of disputes between him and Leonardo about Schneider especially. Ancelotti says he doesn't want Schneider. Leonardo says quite the opposite. I think he should win the title. He's expected to win the title. And there have been people calling into question his ability as a league manager. As a cup manager, you know, as Champions League manager, Ancelotti's fantastic. You couldn't dispute that. But can he get players playing week in, week out? The same way that I doubted he could get a Milan side up to play against Siena is the same feeling when he's getting his team out this season. That said, over the last couple of weeks, they have kind of bounced back with 2 big wins. But I'm not convinced that he's the motivator for a long, hard slog of a league season. I just think he's probably not the right man for the job, and if he doesn't win the Champions League, he probably will leave, and I don't think they'll win the Champions League.
Oh, God, it's got to be about the Champions League. But you're right, actually. I never thought about that. He's more of a guy who wins you the cups as opposed to perhaps wins you titles. It's kind of, he doesn't like the marathon kind of thing about, you know, it's a very good idea. I never thought about that. What about Marseille? Sort of they're the forgotten, let's say, because Lyon has been doing so well that they've kind of dominated their headlines. But do you think there is a chance for them to challenge as well? Or it's too far-fetched?
I think it's slightly far-fetched. I think there's a possibility of second place, but I don't even see that, to be honest. They haven't filled me with any confidence. They lost, what, 3-0 to Lorient at home. I don't see that. I just don't see this being the kind of side that can challenge for a title. I think they'll be hard-pressed to kind of even come in the top 3 or 4 at the moment.
Really? You think so? But they're doing so well. They're, what, 3 points off?
Yeah, I mean, they're looking fairly well poised, but they don't have that same authority. They can't close out games in that same way. And I just don't think there's that same spark there. I think it's
kind of an exciting league with so many people pushing forward.
The French league always is in that way. The French league has got this ability to stop teams running away with it. There's always a kind of balance. A lot of the time, you know, you can have a surprise title winner in the way that you can't have that really in Spain, Italy or England. Not that real out there title winner that comes from, you know, expected to be 6th or 7th or worse and goes and wins the title. That cannot happen. As a result, possibly because teams just aren't as strong.
Well, there you have it. The teams aren't so great, and yet PSG is still suffering in the French league. We'll see what happens there. But do join us after the break where we'll move to Brazil and, of course, all the latest information coming out there about the Copa Sudamericana. We'll see you after the break. Hello and welcome back to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm still Mina Rzouki and I'm still joined by Paul Watson. And of course now what we're talking about is the biggest story that's come out for today. And it is of course the violence that marred the Copa Sudamericana fixture between Sao Paulo and El Tigre, with the Argentinians extremely angry about that. Did you see any of the scenes?
I saw the pictures. Just incredible to see that.
And do you think there's any embellishment there?
I think it's impossible to know exactly what happened. I don't even think a lot of people who were in the stadium have any idea. I don't even know if all the officials know.
Yeah, exactly what has happened. But luckily we are joined by John Cottrell, renowned broadcaster and writer. Hello John, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. But now you're in Brazil, you can tell us a little bit more about this, because I'm flabbergasted that something like this can happen. Honestly, like, you know, they were 2-0 up. We know that the Sao Paulo were. When they came out, I understand that, or at least I read that the Sao Paulo president came out and said the best thing about it was that the Argentines were cowering in their dressing room. I'm not really sure whether that's perhaps the right thing to say. What's going on?
Well, the Sao Paulo president did say something like that at half-time. Let's just recap where we are. It's the final second leg of the Sul-Americana, as it's called here in Brazil. 0-0 from the first leg away in Boca Juniors Stadium, which is not home to Tigre, but they played there. 2-0 at half-time to Sao Paulo. Lucas Moura Osvaldo scored. And then as the players went off, just before the players went off, Lucas Moura was elbowed in the face by a guy called Obran. And the referee didn't take any action. And then as they were walking off towards the tunnel, Lucas Moura pulled out kind of a cotton bud full of blood, showed this Argentine player, you know, this is what you did to me, this is all the blood. And then it kicked off, the big fight kicked off. Before they entered the tunnel, 2 players were sent off, Paulo Miranda and Gias for Tigre. And then apparently, this is where it gets a bit, you know, we don't know exactly what happened here, but the players Both sets of players went into a tunnel. Now, I've heard different reports. One report is the big fight between both sets of players, and the police and São Paulo security people stepped in. And apparently at the time, a gun was flashed into the chest of the Argentine keeper, and security people, São Paulo security people got involved, and they were beating the Argentine players. This is what the Argentines are saying. Now, there's signs of blood in the changing rooms. Not a huge amount, but there's just scrapes of blood on the wall. The Argentines refused to come out for the second half. They stayed there for 30 minutes, around 30 minutes, and in the end, the referee decided to abandon the match and give São Paulo the title.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so basically, according to what El Tigre have come out and said, is that they were hit by security guards. Like you said, there was a flash of a gun. It all seems to be something out of a movie that would star Al Pacino. I can't help but think there's either some exaggeration to it or something, because I can't believe that Sao Paulo would have let this happen, or that the Brazilian authorities would go in there and pummel the Argentines.
Well, you know, it is Brazil, it is South America, so things do tend to get exaggerated. A couple of years ago, there was a game between São Paulo and Palmeiras where apparently some kind of gas pellets was put into the Palmeiras changing room at half-time. So that's happened here in this very stadium. And back in 2000, Vasco played São Caetano in the final of the João Havelange, which was the Brasileirão of the year, and there was a big altercation on one of the stands. One of the stands broke. The game was abandoned. Vasco thought they got the title, but in the end, the game was replayed once again, and Vasco won it with Romário. But you know, it's not usual for this kind of thing to happen. The gun incident is a little strange because even though the police here in Brazil carry guns, of course, they carry a lot of automatic weapons as well, they're not allowed to use them in any way, shape or form inside the stadium. I'm not even sure they carry them inside the stadium. So if a gun came out, then it would have been the São Paulo security people. But I'd be very surprised if they were carrying weapons. And if they were, I don't think it would be legit.
John, this might all have been kind of forgotten now and definitely been overshadowed, but what happened in the game? Was São Paulo completely dominant?
They were always going to win this one, I think. After drawing 0-0 away, Osvaldo scored, Lucas Moura scored, and that was it. 2-0 at half-time. São Paulo were on the way. Probably the Argentines were in for a bit of a hiding because they're not really a big side. They made it to the Sul-Americana here, so, you know, all credit to them. But they're not a massive name even in Argentina. And now they are facing perhaps a 3-year ban from any kind of international competition, as well as a hefty fine. But they will appeal, and I'm certain they will appeal. They went to the local police after the game. They stayed in the changing room for 3 hours. They went to the local police, they filed a report, and now I think it's going to be in the hands of CONMEBOL, who organise these tournaments here. But the first half, you know, it was a decent first half. It was all São Paulo. Tigre didn't really create any chances, and São Paulo were probably going to win, I think. Although, in the first leg, Tigre were much better in the second half, so, you know, we never know what may have happened here.
Okay, and just a last one now. Lucas Moura is obviously going to be off to PSG. Was this the last match for him?
It was the last match. It's the first time he's actually won a tournament, and it was a really, really over-the-top send-off for Lucas Moura, who, to be honest, has done nothing at São Paulo. He hasn't done a thing at São Paulo. You know, the thing is...
So it's a waste of money.
The price PSG paid is hugely inflated. Maybe they'll get their money's worth, but he's not worth that amount of money, no way. And when these offers from Manchester United came in and PSG came in, the majority of the São Paulo fans wanted São Paulo to sell him for that kind of price, because everyone here in Brazil knows he's not worth that kind of money. It's a ridiculous amount of money.
You know what?
And then suddenly, you know, the guy he's done 2 years and a bit. This is the first thing he's won, if he's won it, of course. And he was being treated like the big hero. This is Lucas Moura. And to me, it appeared more like he'd re-signed a contract, and not that he was leaving the club for money back to PSG.
Well, to be honest, I mean, I've watched him play a long time. He does have flashes, but I get it. I wouldn't have paid that much money for him either. And at the time, Inter were like, what do you mean 40 million? Absolutely not. But perhaps let's talk about the fact that now Chelsea will face Corinthians in the World Cup Club. What is it? World Cup.
World Cup.
FIFA Club World Cup.
That's it. In the final. Do you think that this will be a terribly tough test for Corinthians, or do you think they can actually win it?
Oh, they can win it. Of course they can win it. The thing about Corinthians is that they are very difficult to beat. They specialise in 1-0 wins, which is what they got in the semi-final of this competition against the Egyptian sides. They are the masters of this stuff. They are very good at containing a game. If they take the lead, Chelsea will have problems because Corinthians really do adapt their game around taking the lead, sitting back. Although that when they do sit back, it allows the opposition to attack them, which could, of course, cause them problems. But, you know, they are the... well, they won the Brasileirão, the Brazilian League, last season. They won the Libertadores this season. They conceded only 4 goals.
Oh my
so
God.
Chelsea may have problems scoring against Corinthians. Corinthians pride themselves in the fact that they don't have any real stars. There's no Neymar, there's no Lucas Moura, there's no Luis Fabiano, but they are a team, they're a compact team, and they work very, very, very hard, and they will be difficult to break down.
John, do you expect Corinthians to stay with 2 men in attack, or do you feel that perhaps they might resort back to kind of the Copa Libertadores formation?
Well, the thing is, this is the thing about Corinthians. When you have a player like Georgian Hiki, for example, he officially is a forward, but he doesn't really play in that role. For Corinthians, he operates down the right-hand flank normally, and he normally sits in front of Alessandro, who's the right back. So Corinthians front men, apart from Paolo Guerrero, who scored, the Peruvian who scored, he's probably out-and-out front man at the moment. Maybe Emerson as well, I think. But they all do their fair share of defending from midfield. Nearly all the players. Emerson perhaps not a great deal, but Georgian Hiki will be running up and down the flanks, for example, if he starts. So when you look at this Corinthians side on paper, you think it's an attacking lineup, but in fact it's not really. They operate with 1 man up front. If anybody at all is a 1-man striking force. And when they bring on substitutes like Mourinho, who came on, and Georgian Hiki, who came on in the semi-final, you think, oh, these are attacking moves. But in fact, they're not. They're just going to sit there in midfield and maybe try to break on the counter-attack. So if Rafa Benitez has done his homework, he should know about this kind of way that Corinthians operate.
Well, this is an especially important thing for him to win. But I do like to hear of teams that kind of remind me of the old Italian type of football, that 1-0 and defend with your lives. But thank you so much for joining us, John, and hopefully you can come back. Hopefully you won't talk to us about violence next time anyway. But that is all we have time for on the show today. Thank you very much to Paul Watson for co-piloting this episode with me today, and join us next week. So that's the same time, same place, and same football chat. See you then. Cup and pretty much every trophy that was on offer in that year. Now, what Messi's walked away with essentially is a Copa del Rey.
Yes, which is a trophy.
Does that make him less of a scorer than less of a great scorer than Gerd Muller?
No, I don't think it does. And I think in a way it makes him a better player, because I think he's probably had to do a lot of legwork for this team. I think at times Barcelona have been held together by Messi in a way that Muller wouldn't have had to hold together his side.
Because he's just a guy who sat around the 6-yard box, huh?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I think what Messi's contribution in general is what makes it so astonishing. He's not a striker, he's not a poacher in that conventional sense. So for him to have got to this total of goals, it's still the tip of the iceberg of his actual contribution.
So who's better, him or Ronaldo?
It's very hard to answer that question without kind of saying who you like more. I think that's when I generally...
Who do you like more?
Everyone likes Messi more, don't they?
I'm not going to have a comment about it. I think people already know how I feel on it.
Fair enough.
I guess with Messi, what makes him so special is his ability to provide so much more than just simple goals. I mean, he provides an astonishing amount. Obviously, he's breaking records. But at the same time, he delivers the assist. He makes his forward line work better than it would without him. Whereas I guess Ronaldo, and especially how he seems to be feeling this season, perhaps is a player that's a tad more selfish. But what about Falcao? Could he ever hope to one day reach the levels that any of these guys have managed so far?
Well, he's not, in terms of Falcao and Messi, Falcao is not really comparable to Messi. Falcao is very much in the more traditional mould. He's a goal-getter. He's a fantastic goal-getter to be a race. But I think the tragedy is that Real started so poorly and have been so shaky that there's no race to be had. Because I think while they've got the strength in depth in that squad to challenge, I just don't think Atletico do.
Right, and that's another thing about Real Madrid. They lost their Copa del Rey fixture yesterday against Celta Vigo, and of course Mourinho came out and said, well, certain players didn't really put their heart into it, and it's all of that usual. But really, should they be losing such matches, even if it is just a Copa del Rey fixture?
They shouldn't. I can understand the lack of motivation. It's you know, it's the Carling Cup of Spain. It's a competition that people don't particularly want to be in. I don't think there's really any excuse to be losing those kind of games. And I think the biggest concern for Real is that they need to be looking at the fact they're conceding quite sloppy goals, and this is going into their league
Corner
form
kicks,
too. Set pieces. They are. I think they've conceded half their goals pretty much have been set pieces. They've conceded 11, I think, set pieces, and
Sergio Ramos is not doing very well when it comes to those either.
No, Sergio Ramos seems to have kind of forgotten his defensive responsibilities, as is his wont. You know, he will do that from time to time. But from set pieces, you just shouldn't be conceding at that level, at the rate they're conceding. And I think if they don't sort that out, I think that is the kind of thing that will cost them in the Champions League for sure. Which is realistically their only big priority.
So that's it. You're saying La Liga's over. It's all.
I'm not saying it's over. I'm certainly not saying it's over. It would be a massive turnaround from here. I think you'd have to agree. It would be a massive turnaround. It
would be a massive turnaround from here. But, you know, funnily enough, I just don't even think this is the strongest Barcelona that we have seen in recent years. I think that Villanova has managed to construct a side that's, you know, perhaps...
And in fact, he, again, kind of overshadowed Messi, which was quite funny.
You think so?
Well, just in terms of you have a weekend's action and you kind of say, OK...
Messi's broken a record.
Messi's broken a record. Falcao scored 5 goals. He's broken his own record. You know, he's broken the Madrid record for goals in a game. He scored 5 goals in a game against La Coruña, admittedly, but this is a fantastic achievement, and it's an achievement that kind of says, you know, this is a player that can take a team on. He could possibly take this team into a title challenge, admittedly not successfully, but he is what's made Atletico title challengers rather than 3rd or 4th, I think.
Okay, last year when they were playing, they had Diego, obviously Arda Turan, and this season perhaps it's just really, because Diego's not there, he's had to take more, you know, he's had to do more for the team to basically lead it, guide it, and score more goals. Do you think that's actually worked to his benefit, because he's performing a lot better?
It's possibly, yeah. I mean, it's worked to his benefit as an individual, but I think the strain on him may start to show later on. Diego is a massive loss. Diego's a fantastic footballer. You only have to look and see how well he's doing at the moment in Germany, and you think, that's a great player.
If he's so great, then why is he back in playing for results?
It may be because of the moustache that he's grown. Have you seen the moustache?
No, I haven't seen
it doesn't belong on a football pitch. It doesn't really belong anywhere.
But it just seems wherever he goes, he does a good job, and then somehow he doesn't end up there.
I think possibly it might be the culture. I think Diego really enjoys the German football culture. I think it's slightly more relaxed.
Do you really think so? Or I think he desperately wanted to stay at Atletico Madrid, but when it came to finances, they had to let one of their top stars go.
Yeah, oh no, I don't think he wanted to leave Atletico. No, that's not the reason why he left. But I think he is possibly thriving in a slightly less high-pressure environment where the level is generally lower, I think. I think he would have happily stayed, but that's the lot of Atletico, is to shed players.
Yeah, unfortunately.
You shed your skin, you grow a new one. That's the way it is for them.
It was actually a really funny story because Florentino Perez made a joke about how he would pass the serviette to Falcao, which is, of course, how he managed to sign Zinedine Zidane in Monaco in about 2000, I think, when he passed him a napkin saying, "I want to play for Real Madrid," at the time when he was with Juventus, and that's when he responded saying, "Yeah, sure, let's play for Real Madrid." Of course, Falcao didn't get it, maybe because he's very young and he doesn't remember the year 2000, or maybe he just never heard of that whole joke at the time. But they are facing each other. Next match is between Barcelona and Atletico Madrid, so it will be rather Falcao versus Messi.
It will hopefully. Well, Falcao's got a bit of an injury. He didn't train today, and he didn't play in the Copa del Rey, but that's who does.
Yeah, exactly.
But he may. I don't think he'll miss it. I think they're being very careful with it. But it would be a real shame if he were kind of half fit, because it would be a bit like kind of David Hay losing that fight and saying he had a broken toe. You want to see the two best strikers, best goal scorers up against each other. To call it a title decider, as people are, is misleading.
They are number 1 and number 2.
It's misleading, though, I think, because what we're effectively saying is, will there be a title race at all? If Atletico can win this, which I don't think they can, we may have a title race.
We're very down on them.
I'm not very down on them particularly. I really honestly
can't see it happening.
I can't see it happening. I would actually like it to happen. I think fans of football would like it to happen, just for their
Hello and welcome to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. Today we're discussing top scorers in Spain. Messi has broken the record, or has he? And Falcao managed 5 in one game. Last time that happened was in 2002 with Fernando Morientes. Anyway, other than that, we're talking about Juventus, we're talking about transfer rumours, we're talking about France and so much more. But please let me present to you my co-pilot for today, which is none other than Paul Watson. Now, am I to understand that you love Italian football?
I do, yes. I'd say I love Italian football more than any other football in the world.
That's exactly why you're here today.
Exactly.
not that I, favour people or anything like that whatsoever. But, we'll leave that aside for a second because we need to start with Spain. Because, of course, is there anything to talk about other than Lionel Messi and the fact that he broke the record? He now managed 88. But did he break the record?
Well, I don't know that he did. I feel quite sorry for the poor guy that he breaks what he thinks is the record. And then the next week is basically people saying that it's not the record. People coming out of the woodwork saying, actually, it might not be. Was it Zico?
With 89 goals?
Or Godfrey Chitalu of
Zambia.
Zambia.
What was it, 107 goals?
Yeah, something unrealistic sounding like that. But, I mean, you can't help but say Messi's fairly good.
OK, but let me ask you this question now. Gerd Muller, when he won his record, he did so having won the European